Hey everyone, this is Rudy from Rudy Marta Photography, and if this is your first time watching one of the videos in the series, I highly recommend that you actually click up here. That way you can go ahead and see our first video and get an idea as to why we're doing this and the wedding tips and tricks that we want to provide brides and grooms. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about catering. So catering in general typically takes the largest chunk, if one of the largest chunks, out of your overall wedding budget. And within reason, you want to make sure that there's plenty of food, you want to make sure that there's phenomenal service, and at the same time, you don't want your wedding guests to go hangry, and you definitely don't want them to drink too much and not have enough food to balance it out. So I went ahead and I reached out to a local wedding vendor, an expert, because I am a wedding photographer. I am not a caterer by any means. And Alycia from Cocktails Catering gave us a little bit of insight into what brides and grooms need to watch out for when reaching out to caterers and the overall experience before, during, and after the wedding itself. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Hey everyone, this is Rudy from Rudy Marta Photography, and one of the biggest questions that pop up whenever you're planning your own wedding is, what am I going to do for food? What am I going to do for catering? And I wanted to go ahead and reach out to Alycia O'Connor from Cocktails Catering to go ahead and go over the basics of what you should go ahead and ask a caterer throughout the wedding planning process, and when exactly throughout that process you should even think or talk about these things. So without further ado, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. Thanks for coming in today.
No, thanks for having me. Tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me a little bit about Cocktails Catering.
So I am Alycia O'Connor, as you mentioned. I'm the director of sales. I've been with Cocktails for 5 years. Rapid growing company. We're looking to always grow, work with new individuals, branch out to new venues, complete scratch kitchen so we can make anything that our clients are wanting, from vegetarian, Indian, vegan, African, all the way to those gluten-free options that everyone's kind of needing these days. So we're here to help with linens, rentals, anything they need. So
you guys don't just go ahead and focus on food. You literally have everything and everything that
One-stop shop. Yep. Chairs, chargers, gold flatware, all the beautiful things.
That is awesome.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That makes the entire planning process super easy for you, for the bride and the groom anyways, yeah?
Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
One vendor, all in line.
Cool.
Easy for everyone.
Cool. As far as food though, you mentioned that you kind of do everything. Is there anything that you don't do?
No, we like to pride ourselves on never telling the client no. So we like to exceed their expectations, go above and beyond, and even if they want grandma's recipe, then we'll whip it up for them.
You just need grandma to give you the recipe?
Yeah, top secret information, but we normally get it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So obviously when a bride gets engaged and they go ahead and they book the wedding venue, first thing that comes to mind is photographers and any of the other vendors that come out. Catering is very important because I feel like if you don't have food, people are going to get hangry. I feel like that's normal. How far in advance do you think that people should book their caterer?
Immediately following the venue. So you always want to lock in the key players. So as you mentioned, the venue, catering, and photography. Locking in the catering early on in the planning process also ensures that you get a good rate for catering, because you never know what a year, 18 months down the road pricing could look like for those specific items. It also ensures that you get your desired date, because some companies can only do so many events in a day. So then that way you got the ball rolling on the 2-3 major parts, and then from there it's pretty easy to get everything, the little pieces all put in together.
So is there a kind of like a maximum amount of events that you guys can handle?
I think that would depend on the time of year and the guest counts of the events that we have. So normally we don't cap out days for weddings. It would be more like corporate events. But we do recommend that to our clients, just in case something should happen. If they're around the 3-month mark and they call us and we have 25 events on the books, maybe not the best quality of service, so we may not want to suggest that to them.
Yeah, so it's always better to book farther in advance, just because you want to make sure that you get the date and you have pretty much the all-star team as soon as possible.
Exactly, yep.
That's awesome, that's awesome. So in regards to tastings and kind of like designing the menu and everything like that, how far in advance from the wedding date should they book the tastings? How do you all handle that?
So that's a personal preference in regards to when you want to come in and do the tasting. Some of our clients would like to taste the food before securing services, whereas other clients come in, see our showroom, get a little sample of our appetizers, and they already get a feeling of the quality of assurance and everything. We recommend the halfway point for the clients, so then that way the food is still fresh in their minds and they're still aware of like what's on their menu and any allergies that their guests may have. But like I said, there are some clients that do want to come in and do their tastings maybe 18 months in advance, just to know that they're getting the items that they really envision for their day.
Cool, awesome. Obviously, like a lot of people, they're a little bit, I guess, unsure of what they want on their menu because, like you said, there's so many food categories that are out there. Do you provide any sort of guidance during the food tasting?
So we do a private tasting. So it's essentially like a little mini event here in our showroom. So our couples will come in and they're able to bring a family members or a couple bridal party members, and they sit down and they have a private dining experience. So our chef will bring out menu items that they've selected. Sometimes they'll pick the exact items, or sometimes they'll want to waver it a little bit to kind of see how things fit together. And we sit with them, go over the flavor profiles, like the spice, the seasoning on it. If it's buttery, if it's not buttery enough, then that way we can tone it down or customize it to make it exactly how they're wanting. And then that way, it gives it a more like intimate experience versus doing a group tasting where they just kind of like go around in a large scale event and taste like little samplings. So it gears it more towards their taste buds and their style. Yeah.
So that's awesome. I feel like, you're able to adjust things as you go. Can you redo the menu as you get closer to the date if you don't like the first tasting?
Yes, so we do a final meeting 30 days before their event in which we will finalize their contract details, which includes the menu. If they need to do another tasting, we absolutely allow them to come in and taste it just to give them a quality assurance, make sure the changes that they do want to make are in line with the other menu items.
That's seriously so cool. I think that I love the being able to kind of just customize your experience to the bride and groom and kind of just, I don't know, put their likes and their desires and their taste palette exactly to what they want.
Yeah, because everyone's completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Now, obviously, when everybody's on a budget, when they're planning their wedding, I've heard different opinions and different insight on whether or not to have a buffet versus a plated dinner. Is there any sort of like cost saving, or are there pros and cons to each one? I mean, what do you say as far as your expertise?
So with us, I'd probably say about 75% of the time we would do a buffet style. It is way more cost effective for our clients, and they do get a lot more for their money. It's a little bit more bang for their buck. So we definitely would suggest doing the buffet option. Not only is it easier for our clients because they don't have to get the little RSVPs, they don't have to make the escort cards and have assigned seats, but it also makes it a little bit easier on us. And we do a little elevated buffet experience. So we'll take the plate from the guests, do a nice clean portion control, make sure there's no sauces running anywhere. And we also work back there so that if anyone has any allergies, then we can kind of guide them along the way. Whereas if a plated meal, they get a set portion and it's kind of what you ordered is what it is. So there's not really any flexibility on the day of.
Okay, and I know in cocktail hours, sometimes I see stations versus somebody passing around hors d'oeuvres. Is there any difference in that as well, or doesn't matter?
The price with the cocktail hour would vary depending on the items that they have chosen. So like obviously like a sesame seared tuna is going to cost a little bit more than a cheese display. So we generally include 2 appetizers in our cocktail hour, and they're more than welcome to add on whatever they want to. We do an amazing deal where they get a discounted rate on additional items. But sometimes people do opt out of having the past just to have the stationary ones so their guests can kind of graze at their leisure.
So in regards to the guest to staff ratio, obviously, the more staff that you have, it fluctuates depending on how many guests you have. Is there a specific amount that you guys go with, or just for weddings, not corporate events?
So there is a ratio that we would go with depending on the type of service and the guest count, like you mentioned. With a plated dinner and action stations, there's a lot of little moving parts that would take essentially double the amount of staff as with a buffet. So with a buffet, we do about 1 for every 20, and then with the stations and the plated, we do about 1 server for every 10 guests. So then that way, all those little details and little intricate pieces of those stations or plated dinners are getting taken care of by our staff.
And this includes bar service as well?
Bar service is, depending on our guest count, we definitely recommend 1 bartender for every 75 guests.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that way the line keeps moving, no one's waiting for their beverages, and everything gets rotated nice and cold the whole night.
That's awesome. And then that's the entire night all the way until strikeout.
Yes.
So in regards to planning a wedding, I feel like it's natural. When you're shopping for anything, I feel like it's very natural to just go ahead and shop. You want to go ahead and get the best bang for your buck, but also you want to make sure that you have a wonderful experience. In regards to finding a caterer, what are some questions that you think people, brides and grooms, should ask a caterer?
First thing on my list, I would probably check licensing and insurance, because most venues are going to require that. Second, the freshness and the quality of the food. Are they going to be delivering the food hot from their facility to your venue, or they are planning to prepare it on site? And then in addition to that, what is included in their packages? Are they offering the same as some of the competitors, such as linens? Are they going to be staying for the duration of the event, or is it more of just a food service instead of a full service? And is your setup and breakdown included? Sometimes venues require the caterer to take care of those items.
Honestly, I feel like that's a lot of really good suggestions. When I used to bartend and I used to work in the food and beverage industry, I would go ahead and see things that came in fresh and some things that came in frozen. As a caterer, is it all in one direction or the other, or is it kind of like a mix? Is that something that as a bride and groom, should we ask that?
Yes, because you don't want if you versus, let's say, salmon, for instance.
Yes.
We get salmon in probably 3 times a week for events. So if you freeze salmon, the freshness and the flavor and the quality of the salmon decreases greatly. So you want the freshest product that you can get, and you will definitely be able to tell a fresh product versus a frozen product.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, in all-inclusive pricing, is that something that happens within the catering industry, or are there some instances where it's like, okay, well, here's your per plate fee, and it's plus on the tail end? How does that work?
With us, we do a subtotal, which includes the food and beverage, and then we do have a service charge, and then gratuity and tax. So that's all itemized out. It may vary depending on companies that they're looking at. A lot of times people like to just bundle it all together and give a base price per person, so that they know if they're adding on 10 more guests, then this is the dollar amount you're going to charge for those 10 guests.
Okay, so a bride and groom should definitely be aware of that.
Yeah, variations in contracts are pretty common from caterer to caterer.
During the reception, obviously caterers, that's kind of like their domain, but are they in charge of cake cutting? Is that something that's common?
Yes, generally we take care of cake cutting. It is important that the couple lets us know if they want to save the top layer of their cake, and that they have a box, because a lot of times cake vendors don't bring one, and we obviously don't have cute little boxes lying around. And if there's multiple flavors, that we know to cut into each layer to offer all flavors to guests.
That's so smart. That's so smart. Now, do you also do champagne pouring?
Yep. So on the timeline, they would include that, whether they want it before or after dinner, so we can make sure that it's poured in the appropriate time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I guess my last and final question would be, if a bride and groom, came up to you, what would be 1 or maybe 2 pieces of advice that you would give them when they're searching for a caterer?
I would definitely say trust your gut. Don't second guess things. Often we have couples who come in, they make their decisions, and then 3 or 4 weeks later they're coming in saying, I don't know if I want this, my mom says this. So it's definitely important to just trust your initial instinct and follow your gut, because it's always going to be, you're going to end up going back to that initial first plan, because that's essentially what you wanted to begin with. So it's always good to just follow the initial path that you're on.
That's literally follow your gut with food.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy day, because I know y'all are always busy. And thank you for sharing your insight and your expertise on everything. I hope that this helps out brides in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you.
No worries.
I hope that provided a little bit of insight into what brides and grooms should keep in mind when planning their own wedding and talking to a catering company. That being said, if you like what was said, give us a thumbs up. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell. That way you get notified when new videos get posted. I am currently working on the next video, and I'll go ahead and I'll update the description below and probably link to it up here. But that being said, I'll see you on the next one, y'all. Happy planning.